Chapter 5 The Forgotten Betrayal, a perfect day that shouldn't exist. For the first time in years, Damien and I spent a day together like we were still in love. He had woken up that morning with a bright energy, smiling as he pulled me into the kitchen and insisted we cook breakfast together. "You're going to regret this," I warned as he handed me a pan. "I don't think I will," he teased, kissing the tip of my nose like it was the most natural thing in the world. I nearly dropped the spatula. Every time he did something like that, every time he touched me, smiled at me, looked at me with adoration, I felt myself slipping further into the illusion, forgetting that this wasn't real, forgetting that he wasn't mine anymore. But it was easy to pretend when he was right there, laughing with me as we burned pancakes, leaning in too close, his fingertips grazing mine when he handed me a cup of coffee. It was easy to pretend when he pulled me outside later, insisting we take a walk in the garden. "Did we do this often?" he asked, looking around at the place we had once built together. "Not for a long time," I admitted. His smile dimmed. "That's a shame. I feel like I would have liked that." "You did. You just stopped wanting it with me." Instead of answering, I let him take my hand and lead me along the path we used to walk when we were happy. And for a little while, I let myself believe that we still were. That night, the illusion broke. Damien and I had spent the entire day wrapped in a fragile bubble of happiness, but something changed when the sun went down. He became quieter, his smiles turning thoughtful, his touches lingering with hesitation. It wasn't until we were in bed that I realized something was wrong. "Alara," he murmured in the dark. I turned to face him, my heart already racing. "What is it?" He hesitated. I think I remembered something today." Every muscle in my body locked. I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay steady. "What do you mean?" He exhaled slowly, his fingers trailing absent-mindedly against the sheets. "It wasn't much, just a feeling." I waited, afraid to breathe. "I was in the study earlier," he continued, "and I saw my suitcases." My stomach twisted into a knot. I had tried to hide them, tucked them away in the closet, pretending they had never been packed in the first place. But he had found them, and now the past was clawing its way back. "I don't know why they're packed," he admitted. But when I looked at them, I felt uneasy, like I wasn't supposed to be here. I clenched my fists beneath the blankets, forcing myself to stay still. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. He was remembering. Piece by piece, the truth was coming back, and I had no way to stop it. The next morning, Sophia showed up at the house. I had barely opened the door before she pushed past me, her heels clicking against the floor with sharp precision. "This has gone on long enough," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "Sophia, he's remembering, isn't he?" She turned to face me, arms crossed, eyes filled with barely contained anger. "He called me last night." My heart stuttered. "What?" "He doesn't remember everything yet, but he knows something is wrong. He found my number in his phone and called me, asking if we knew each other." I gripped the edge of the door, my nails digging into the wood. "What did you tell him?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Sophia studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, finally, she sighed. "I told him we were acquaintances." I exhaled, relief washing over me, but it was short-lived. "Do you really think you can keep this up forever?" she asked, her voice softer now. "He's going to remember Alara, and when he does, it's going to hurt so much more, because you kept it from him." I swallowed hard, my throat burning. I knew she was right. But that didn't mean I was ready to lose him. I wasn't ready to watch his love for me disappear all over again. That night, I found Damien in the living room, staring at a picture on the fireplace mantel. It was an old photo of us, one from when we were still happy. "I remember this," he murmured, his fingers brushing over the glass. My heart clenched. "You do?" He nodded slowly. "It was our anniversary, wasn't it?" I swallowed against the lump in my throat. "Yes." He let out a breath, shaking his head. "It's strange. I don't remember everything. But when I look at this, I feel something. Like I know exactly how much I loved you that day. I felt like I was breaking apart piece by piece. Because that day, our anniversary, was one of the last good memories we had before everything fell apart. Before the distance. Before the betrayal. Before Sophia." He turned to look at me then, something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. "Alara," he whispered. "Why does it feel like we lost something?" Tears burned in my eyes. "Because we did." But I couldn't say that. I couldn't tell him that this beautiful, fragile love between us had already died once, so instead, I lied. I smiled, reached out, and took his hand in mine. We didn't lose anything, and maybe for just one more night I could pretend that was true. But fate was cruel, because just as I was trying to hold on to the illusion, the past finally crashed back in. I woke up in the middle of the night to find Damien missing from bed. Panic surged through me as I rushed out of the room, my heart pounding. And then I saw him, standing in the study, holding something in his hands, a letter. My breath caught. I knew that letter. It was the one I had written but never given to him, the one I had written after I found out about Sophia, the one where I had poured out my heartbreak, my betrayal, my pain, and Damien was reading it. His hands trembled as he turned the page, his face pale, his expression unraveling with every word he read. I stepped forward, my voice shaking. Damien? He looked up, and in that moment I knew. He remembered. Everything. His face twisted in agony. Alara! His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of the past crashing down between us. What have we done? I had no answer because I knew. This time, there was no going back. Chapter 6, The Memories Begin to Return. The Silence Between Us. Damien hadn't spoken a word to me since he found the letter. That night, after I found him in the study, he had simply stared at me with wide, broken eyes, like I was a stranger, like he had woken up from a dream and realized that the person beside him wasn't real. Then, without another word, he had walked past me and gone to bed. I had followed him, lying awake beside him, terrified of what would happen when morning came. And now, as I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching him sit on the edge of the bed, rubbing his temples as if his head was splitting open with memories, I knew the illusion was shattering, piece by piece, memory by memory. Damien? My voice was soft, hesitant. He flinched. Not a big movement, just the slightest jerk of his shoulders, like the sound of my voice physically hurt him. A sharp pain lanced through my chest, because that one flinch told me everything. The man who had loved me so deeply just days ago, the man who had kissed me like I was his entire world, was slipping away. His love for me had been built on the absence of the truth, and now that the truth was returning, so was the pain. He turned to face me then, his blue eyes dark and clouded with something I couldn't read. When were you going to tell me? His voice was hoarse, like he had spent all night trying to make sense of everything. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Never, right? I sucked in a sharp breath. I was scared, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Damien exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Scared of what? I opened my mouth, but the words refused to come out. I couldn't tell him the truth. That I was scared of losing him all over again. That I knew, deep down, the moment he remembered everything, he would go back to hating me. That I had been selfish, clinging to these stolen moments of happiness, even knowing they weren't mine to keep. His jaw tightened. Tell me the truth, Alara. I swallowed hard. I was scared that if you remembered, you'd leave me again. His whole body tensed, a thick silence settled between us. Then, finally, his voice dropped to a whisper. So I really was leaving, wasn't I? I squeezed my eyes shut, a tear slipping down my cheek. Yes. Damien inhaled sharply, his hand gripping the bedsheet like he was trying to hold himself together. For the longest time, he didn't say anything. Then, just when I thought he wouldn't, he asked the question I had been dreading the most. Why? I stared at him. Did he really not remember why? I had spent so long fearing this moment, but I had never considered that he would only remember pieces, that the full picture wasn't clear yet. That, right now, he only knew that something had gone terribly wrong, but he didn't remember what. He didn't remember her. The realization made me lightheaded. I had two choices. Tell him everything now, or hold on to these last moments, these last fragments of love, before the inevitable happened, before he remembered Sophia, and the love in his eyes turned into hatred all over again. I hesitated, and that hesitation cost me, because in the next moment, Damien's eyes darkened, like something had just clicked in his mind, and then he whispered a name, Sophia. I felt my blood go cold. The name hung in the air between us like a ghost, unseen but suffocating. I forced myself to stay still, to keep my face neutral, but inside, I was crumbling. You remember her? My voice was barely above a whisper. Damien pressed his fingers against his temple, his breathing unsteady. Not everything. It's like flashes, feelings. But when you hesitated, he stopped himself, his jaw tightening. I felt her name before I remembered it. I dug my nails into my palms. This was it, the first real crack in the dam. It wouldn't be long now before the floodgates opened. He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. Who was she? I swallowed hard. Damien, tell me. The desperation in his voice nearly broke me. I knew he wasn't asking for her name. He was asking what she meant to us, what role she played in the destruction of our marriage. And I couldn't lie, not anymore. I forced myself to meet his gaze, my hands trembling at my sides. I took a breath, bracing myself. She was the woman you were in love with. His expression flickered, confusion, denial, shock. Then, finally, pain. A deep, soul-crushing pain that made me want to take the words back. But it was too late. The truth was already setting in. His breathing turned unsteady. I had an affair. It wasn't a question, just a quiet, heartbreaking realization. Tears blurred my vision. Yes. He ran a shaky hand through his hair, exhaling a sharp, broken breath. I don't. He stopped, shaking his head. I don't remember why. I let out a soft, bitter laugh, even as my heart ached. Neither do I, Damien. Not really. Because even after all these years, I had never been able to understand why he had chosen her over me, why he had turned cold, why he had fallen out of love with me. He pressed his hands over his face, his entire body tense with the weight of a past he was only just beginning to recall, a past that was only going to hurt him more the closer he got to the truth. I stepped forward instinctively, wanting to comfort him, but he flinched away. That small movement cut me deeper than anything else. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. This was what I had feared, that the moment he started remembering, the distance between us would return, that he would hate me again. Damien, I whispered. He let out a shaky breath. Then, slowly, he looked up at me, and in his eyes, I saw it, the first ember of resentment, a stark contrast to the love that had once been there just days ago. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to, because I already knew. The love we had been living in for the past few weeks had been built on borrowed time, and that time had just run out. Chapter 7, The Truth Will Break Us Both. Damien was avoiding me. It wasn't obvious, not at first. At breakfast, he still pulled out my chair for me. He still asked if I wanted coffee. He still reached for the sugar the way he always did. But his eyes never met mine, and when I reached for his hand, out of habit, out of a desperate need for something real, he pulled away. I had spent weeks living in a beautiful lie. A world where Damien loved me again, where I wasn't just the woman he had once hated, but reality had finally caught up to us, and it was unraveling everything we had built since he woke up. I stirred my coffee slowly, staring at the dark liquid as if it held answers. It didn't. Neither did the silence stretching between us. Damien had been lost in thought all morning, his fingers idly tapping against the table. I knew what was happening. The memories were coming back, piece by piece, and he was trying to make sense of them without asking me, because he no longer trusted me to tell him the truth. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to break the silence. Did you sleep well? A meaningless question, a way to test the waters. Damien's fingers stilled. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then finally he spoke. I had dreams. I set my coffee down carefully. Dreams? He let out a slow breath, his fingers tightening around his mug. Memories, I think. They don't make sense yet, but they feel real. My heart pounded. What did you see? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Damien hesitated, then slowly he looked at me. For weeks I thought you were the love of my life, he said quietly, but in my dreams I saw myself hurting you. I forced myself to stay still. His voice was careful, measured, but his eyes were searching me for something. The truth. Confirmation of the pain he had caused me before the accident. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. You did, I admitted softly. The muscle in his jaw clenched, his fingers curled into a fist on the table. How? A cold shiver ran down my spine, because this was the moment I had been dreading, the moment he asked for the truth, and I couldn't run from it anymore. Not when he was already piecing it together on his own. I looked down at my hands, at the small scars along my fingers, the ones he had once kissed so tenderly. I don't know where to start, I whispered. Start with her, Damien said, his voice like steel. Start with Sophia. I exhaled shakily. Of course, that was the part of his past he was desperate to understand. The why. Why he had fallen out of love with me. why he had chosen someone else, why he had left. I lifted my gaze to his, my heart aching at the turmoil in his eyes. "She was your lover," I said quietly. "You met her at work. I don't know when it started, but you changed. You stopped coming home. You stopped looking at me the way you used to." Damien flinched as if my words physically hurt him. His throat bobbed. "And you knew?" I didn't want to believe it at first, I admitted, my voice raw. But one day, I found the messages. I found the hotel reservations. I saw you with her. The room felt suffocatingly small. Damien let out a sharp breath, his hands running over his face. And then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, he whispered, "Did I love her?" I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My chest squeezed painfully, but I forced myself to answer, "Yes." The word felt like poison on my tongue. And judging by the way Damien's entire body tensed, it felt like poison to him too. He exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of the table. "Then why didn't I leave you sooner?" Tears burned my eyes, because that was the most painful part of it all. The not knowing. The cruel way he had lingered, dangling the hope of our marriage in front of me, only to rip it away over and over again. "You did," I whispered. "You packed your bags, you signed the divorce papers, you left me." Damien's breath hitched, the color drained from his face. His hands trembled on the table. He didn't remember it. He didn't remember any of it. But his body felt the truth, the weight of the decisions he had once made, the hurt he had caused. I wiped at my eyes, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "I was ready to let you go," I admitted. "I didn't want to fight for someone who didn't love me anymore." Silence. Damien's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard, and then in a voice so quiet it was almost broken, "Why did I wake up loving you?" I sucked in a breath, because that was the cruelest part of this entire story. Before the accident, Damien had chosen someone else, but when he woke up, he had looked at me like I was his entire world, and now he didn't understand why. I reached for his hand before I could stop myself. This time, he didn't pull away. "Maybe," I whispered, my voice trembling, "a part of you never stopped." His grip tightened, and in that moment, I saw it. A war waging in his eyes, the memories of a love that had fallen apart, colliding with the love he had rediscovered. The past fighting against the present, the truth trying to break us both. And I knew Damien had a choice to make. Would he hold on to the man he had been before the accident, or would he fight for the man he had become since waking up? Chapter 8. Love After the Lies. The silence between us felt like a chasm too wide to cross. Damien hadn't spoken since I told him the truth. His fingers were still curled around mine, tightly, like he was holding on to something he wasn't ready to lose, but his eyes were lost in a storm of emotions. The weight of his past had finally settled on his shoulders. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the cruel choices he had made before the accident, and now he had to decide what to do with it. I could see it happening in real time, the war inside him. The part of him that had fallen in love with me again since waking up, the part of him that had spent weeks looking at me with warmth and tenderness, was fighting the version of himself who had walked away without a second thought. He let go of my hand suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor as he stood up. "I need air," he muttered, and then he walked out, leaving me alone with my heart pounding in my chest. I should have expected this. No one could wake up and find out they had betrayed the person they claimed to love and just accept it. Still, it didn't stop the sharp, aching pain that spread through my chest as I sat at the empty table, staring at the place where his hands had just been. I pressed my fingers to my temples, squeezing my eyes shut. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. Now that he knew the truth, he had to make a choice. Would he choose me, or would he remember why he had left me in the first place? I exhaled shakily, forcing myself to stand. No matter what, I wouldn't beg him to stay. Not this time. I found Damien outside, leaning against the railing of the balcony, his face turned toward the horizon. The sky was streaked with deep purples and oranges, the last remnants of the sunset. But Damien wasn't looking at the sky, he was lost in his thoughts. I stepped closer, wrapping my arms around myself as the evening air settled against my skin. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly. He exhaled a slow breath, still not looking at me. "No." My heart clenched. I nodded, staring at the ground. "I understand." Silence. Then finally he turned to face me. The Damien I'd grown to love again, the one who had woken up in the hospital and looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered, was still there in his eyes. But now there was something else. pain, confusion, regret. I don't know who I am anymore, he admitted. I swallowed hard. You're Damien. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Which one? I didn't have an answer for that because I understood what he meant. There was the Damien before the accident, the man who had fallen out of love with me, who had betrayed me, who had chosen someone else. And then there was the Damien who had woken up in the hospital, the man who had loved me, who had held me like I was the most precious thing in his world, who had fought to make me smile again. They were both real. They were both him. And he didn't know which one he was supposed to be. I spent weeks thinking you were my everything, he murmured, his voice raw, loving you, wanting you, and now I have to live with the fact that before the accident, I broke your heart. I blinked back the sting of tears. Do you still love me? I whispered. His breath hitched, a long pause. Then, so quietly I barely heard it, yes. A tear slipped down my cheek. But I don't deserve you, he added, his voice cracking. My chest tightened painfully. The way he was looking at me, it was like he was already saying goodbye. No, I said, shaking my head. No, don't do this, Damien. I don't know how to be the man you deserve, he said, his voice heavy with guilt. I don't know how to live with the fact that I hurt you, that I chose her over you. I sucked in a sharp breath. I had spent months bracing for this moment, for the day he remembered, for the day he left again. But now that it was happening, I realized something. I wasn't the same woman I had been before the accident. I wasn't going to let someone else decide my worth. I wasn't going to wait to be chosen. So I straightened my shoulders, wiped my tears, and met his gaze with unwavering strength. I'm not asking you to be the man you were before, I said firmly, and I'm not asking you to forget the past. But you have to decide what kind of man you want to be now. He swallowed, his hands clenching into fists. You do have a choice, Damien. You can leave. You can decide you don't deserve me. You can walk away, just like you did before. I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to finish. Or you can stay, and you can fight for the love we found again. A heavy silence settled between us. His chest rose and fell with each unsteady breath. His fingers twitched at his sides like he wanted to reach for me, but didn't know if he could. I held my ground. I wouldn't beg him to stay. Not this time. Whatever he decided, it had to be his choice. Then finally, Damien took a slow, hesitant step toward me. Then another, and another, until he was standing right in front of me, his hands trembling as he reached for my face. His thumb brushed away my tears. I don't want to leave, he whispered, my breath caught. His forehead pressed against mine, his voice barely audible. I don't want to be the man who walked away from you. Tears slipped down my cheeks. Then don't, I whispered back. Damien let out a shaky breath, and then, finally, his lips met mine. And this kiss, it wasn't like the ones before. Not like the sweet, hesitant kisses we had shared in the past few weeks. Not like the desperate, broken ones before the accident. This kiss was something new, something real. Not a love built on lies, not a love built on forgotten memories, but a love reborn, a love chosen. When we finally pulled apart, Damien's hands were still cupping my face, his eyes searching mine. I can't erase what I did, he murmured. I can't take back the pain I caused you. I know, I said softly, but I swear to you, Alina, he whispered, his voice raw, I will never be that man again. A tear slipped down my cheek, and for the first time in a long, long time, I believed him. Epilogue, a love that survived. The morning sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, casting a golden glow over the soft linen sheets. The scent of fresh coffee drifted in from the kitchen, mingling with the crisp spring air. I stretched, my fingers brushing against the empty space beside me. A small smile touched my lips. He was already awake. Pulling on my robe, I padded toward the kitchen, where I found Damien standing by the counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He looked up at me and grinned. Morning, sleepyhead? Morning, I murmured, stepping closer. His arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me against him. He smelled like coffee and warmth, like home. And that was what he was now. Home. It hadn't been easy. The past year had been filled with late-night conversations, painful confessions, and quiet moments where we had to choose each other all over again. Damien had fought for us, truly fought in a way he never had before. He had proven, time and time again, that he wasn't the man who had betrayed me, that he wasn't the man who had walked away. that he never would be again. "You're staring," he teased, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead. I laughed. Maybe I just like looking at my husband. His smile softened, his hands sliding to rest on my hips. Good, because I plan on spending the rest of my life looking at you. I felt my heart swell in my chest. This love, the love we had rebuilt from the ashes of our past, was stronger than I had ever imagined it could be. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was all that mattered. I leaned up, pressing a lingering kiss to his lips. He hummed against my mouth, deepening the kiss, his fingers curling into the fabric of my robe. I pulled away with a playful smile. "You'll be late for work." "Let me be late," he murmured, chasing after my lips again. I laughed, swatting his chest. "Go, before I make you even later." His eyes darkened with promise. "That's a dangerous threat, Mrs. Callahan." Warmth spread through me at the sound of my name. My name. The name of a woman who had fought for her happiness. The name of a woman who had been broken but had put herself back together, stronger than ever. A woman who had once feared the truth but had finally found peace in it. Because the truth was simple. Damien and I had been shattered, but love, real, unbreakable love, had put us back together, and this time nothing would tear us apart again. The end. And that's the end of our story. But love, just like life, is full of second chances. What did you think of Elena and Damien's journey? Did their love deserve a second chance? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more heart-wrenching, suspenseful romance stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. More dramatic, emotional, and twist-filled love stories are coming your way, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes love isn't about forgetting the past, it's about choosing each other despite it. See you in the next story.